Today I have a very special guest with me, and this is a different episode than really we've ever done. And this is why I love these like Friday episodes because we can bring on a variety of different guests. But I want to just jump right out, Coco.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll introduce you in a second and I'll tell the listeners how we know each other and all of that. But why do you think, and from your perspective, how are your interiors important for your health?
Well, your surroundings and your health are directly related in so many different ways, but specifically your mental health and your surroundings affect your mood and your overall energy. And one of my favorite aspects of design is that you can walk into a space and totally change your perspective. And I think in my projects, that's really what I strive to design. And I think it's so important to be able to give your clients kind of the overall concept and vibe of what they're wanting and what they're feeling. And when you're having a bad day and you come home from work, your home is your safe space. And I think especially after COVID, it's really important to have a space that you can come home to and really let go and be yourself. And there's so much craziness happening in the world, especially today. And I think your surroundings have a direct relationship to how you're feeling.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to work with you because I struggle with it so much, but I know how important it is. Like when you have a space that you love and that, because I went from, trying to do everything myself and it looked like hideous and was a mess.
No,
And like,
it was good.
it was like, oh, you didn't see that I like my our North Carolina apartment. And before that was just like, bad. Like, I just don't have an eye for it like you do.
We got there together.
We got there together. But I do see the direct correlation between having a space that you love, even if it's just like having like a clean, tidy, nice lighting and things like that, if possible, makes such a big difference. I mean, you could have the exact same room, but it could be organized different and designed different and can make you feel different. So that's kind of why I wanted to have you on, is because interiors, you're like, how does that relate to like, this is a fitness podcast. Like, how does that relate to fitness and health? But I do think it is important. And I don't want anyone to walk away from this episode and think like, I need to go hire a designer. Although like, if you can, it's awesome.
Totally.
But I want people to learn from this episode so that they can take things from you, and you have such a passion. So I want them to be able to take things from you too and like learn and apply on their own.
Yeah. And I think also that's mental health, but I think also in terms of physical health, we're both working to help our clients through form and function. And I think people don't really understand the history of like how furniture is designed and how it's supposed to be comfort for your body and fit. And that's why I think custom furniture is so amazing, because if you have a client that has a personal injury or something, or requires like a specific pitch in a back seat, you can really design something that works best for their body. And so I love doing custom design specifically for that. And for me personally, I had spinal surgery in 2018. And so comfort for me is everything. And so, there can be a restaurant in LA that I've been trying to get into for months. And, I walk in the door and they have those horrendous, like 90-degree, no back cushion. I know. I love plywood. It's having a moment and I'm here for it. But not having a pitch or like any sort of back support when you're sitting for a 2 to 3 hour amazing meal is really tough. And so I, will walk into the restaurant and immediately see that chair. And then I'm already understanding that that whole experience is going to be uncomfortable for me, like physically and mentally.
Well, and that's what like you really did with our house. Like every piece that we have is beautiful, but also comfortable. Like she found these awesome like vintage chairs that we have in our living room.
Chairs.
And they look so cool, but they're so comfortable.
I know.
And I feel like you have a really good eye for making things look like aesthetically beautiful, but then also having the form and function, which
and I think it's very comfortable. And I love collectible furniture, which is basically sculptural furniture that sometimes isn't very comfortable. And I think having one or two pieces and having that specific moment in a corner, but overall, if something isn't comfortable, I won't propose it.
I love that. I think that's huge. Okay, so now we need to tell everybody who you are. So this is Coco. Coco and I have known each other for years now
Yeah.
because actually we connected through our husbands. Your husband went to KU.
Yes.
Huge KU fan.
Mr. KU.
Yeah, should we give him a little shout out?
Yeah, shout out to Mike.
Shout out to Mike Vernon. He has the hearings, which
Yes.
is like if you're a huge KU fan, you got to look up the hearings.
Yes.
You guys are like power couple. It's so cute. But so we became friends when I lived in LA, and then we moved from LA to Austin, and you helped us with our Austin home. And then after that, when we expanded and wanted to create a bigger working space, you've helped us with this space. So you are currently sitting in the space that you designed. And when I say we get so many compliments, like you truly, truly did it. And we love, like you're saying, like with mental health, like we love coming and working here. Like it really makes a big difference.
And that's all I want.
Yes, like in our productivity, in our moods, like it's huge. It's awesome. So tell us a little bit about like your career, because you have such an interesting, cool career that I think a lot of people would be like, oh, wow. So tell us about your career.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Austin, Texas. So it's so fun for me being back here filming with you in my home city. So I'm having a moment too. But I went to school at the University of Georgia and studied furnishings and interiors. And I first got interested in interiors through actually internships that I did in high school. I really wanted to do the wedding planning track and event planning track. And I think through that and developing the space plans and the schemes, I really fell in love with interiors that way. And I fell out of love with wedding planning because you had to break apart the room when it was all done. And that broke my heart. And I had a few girls in my sorority that were doing the interiors track at Georgia. And I didn't even know that that was a career option, to be honest. And I took some of the classes, didn't tell my parents that I was switching majors, and created a portfolio and got into the program. And that was that. And I've loved interiors ever since. And after school, I applied to a bunch of firms in Dallas. And there was a firm that was run by this iconic designer, Emily Summers. And she was probably the only designer that would have brought me back to Texas because I really wanted to move straight to California. And she was the first woman in the South to truly do contemporary work. And I got an opportunity to be a design assistant in the Dallas office, and I took it, and it was pivotal for me. I worked for her for 3.5 years, and I touched every phase of the design process, and I was immediately client-facing, which is very rare as a design assistant. And I also helped with a project in New York out of her New York office, and I feel like those 3 years were my grad school in a way. And I think the reason why it was so amazing for me is that she took the time to take me to upholstery workrooms and really teach me like stitching details and cord details and staining process. And for a principal to go out of their way to teach a design assistant, it's very unusual. And so watching her just be an amazing designer as well as an amazing businesswoman was so imperative to my career. And so I was 25 and single at the time, and I was like, if I'm ever going to California, it's now or never. And I interviewed with 14 firms in 8 days.
Wow. This sounds so on brand. You haven't changed.
It was like my favorite week of my life. And my sister was living in SF, and it's such a beautiful city. And I landed with Lauren Jeremiah. It's called Jeremiah Design with a G. And very art and art history based and focused, which was really interesting for me to see that side of interiors and color drenching and really mixing textures. And she was really incredible to work for. I was with her for a year, and then I moved on to the Wiseman Group under Paul Wiseman. And he is like the typical Californian high-end comfort design, kind of overscaled, a lot of neutrals, and he has really amazing projects. He's such an amazing human being. He's just like a big teddy bear, and I'm still very close with a lot of the people I worked with there. And then again, I think I was with him for a year and a half, and then I got a really amazing opportunity with Ken Folk, who did the Commodore Perry here. Not my project, but shout out to Commodore Perry. And it was such a wild ride, but I would not be the designer I am today if I wasn't with him for those 4 years in SF. And there was so much color and texture and velvet and trim and fringe and all of these things that I never used. And I also worked on a lot of commercial projects with him. So I worked on a venue restaurant space in Healdsburg, which is North Napa. And I worked on 2 historic San Francisco restaurants, Tosca and Boulevard. And I had an amazing residential project in Woodside, which is about 30 minutes south of San Francisco. But I was able to work on commercial projects, which I had never done before. And the client relationship and the whole design process is very different than residential. So I just learned so much. And he is such an amazing salesperson. And essentially, that's what a designer is. You know, you're selling your own opinions and thoughts and trying to talk people into buying them, you know? And so from there, I was with him for probably 4 years. And then Mike and I got married, and we really wanted a fresh change. And the design industry in Los Angeles is amazing. And I got an opportunity with Jeremiah Brent, who is an absolute angel. I mean, truly one of the nicest, most genuine people. And I think for a principal at that high end of design is really rare to find too. And I think something also that stuck with me that he did that I don't think he would mind that I shared is whenever he would come to a project site, either for a client meeting or just a walkthrough, he would stop and introduce himself to every single person on site, every sub, look at them in the eyes, shake their hand. And that is also very rare because sometimes there's 100 people on site working. And he was just a gem of a human being.
Well, you were saying how he's portrayed on Queer Eye is like how he is.
Totally. That he's not playing a character. That is him. I have cried with him many times.
Yeah. Aww.
We love each other. And he was so kind and generous. And it was so fun working in the West Coast office. And him and his husband are based in New York. But the clients and projects in LA were so fabulous.
Insane. I wish we could tell the listeners who you worked with.
Yes.
It is insane. You guys would,
we'll just say that they're very fun projects.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just a really amazing experience. And so that was the past 3 years. And then up until March 1st, I was with him. And now I have finally started my own studio. And I think if you look at my portfolio, it kind of feels all over the place, but it's because all the firms were so different. And I was very strategic where I did work and where I accepted an invitation, basically, because I wanted to develop that design toolbox for myself. And so any client or any project that came to me, I wanted to be able to have that knowledge of how to design for that person, because I'm first always inspired by the client and the surroundings. And there's a lot of designers where you look at their projects and you're like, oh, that's this designer, that's that designer. But that's not necessarily how I want to be. Like, I want my projects to be very different, and I want them to be very client driven.
Yeah. Well, we definitely felt that working with you. And when we moved from LA to Austin, we got rid of all of our furniture and we bought a home. And so we were starting from scratch. And when I tell you, I was so overwhelmed with the idea of furnishing.
I mean, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
Furnishing an entire home. How am I going to design? Like, what am I going to do? And so we had you help us and design basically everything in our house. And we did some light renovations in the kitchen and stuff, but mainly like furnishing and things like that. And you helped take away the overwhelm of the whole project and probably expedited the whole, like if I were to do that on my own, it would not be done. And we've been there for 2 years.
And that's why I'm here.
And that's why you're exactly. But what I want to do for the listener is, can you walk us through your process of working with a client? Because you didn't make it overwhelming, because you broke it down into like individual steps. And I know for you, that's so basic. But if someone's like starting with a new home or a new project or a new room, kind of what's like the step-by-step of where you start and to the finished end product?
Yeah. So as I said, every client is very, very different. And that's what I love about my job. But I do start the projects in a similar way. And then depending on the client, we kind of work differently, just what works best for them. But I do always start each project with a client questionnaire. And I can't remember if I even gave you one because I know you guys so
Yeah,
well.
you did.
Oh, I
You
did.
did.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I always send them.
Yes.
So with a client questionnaire, and I change some of the questions depending on the client and where they live and just their family. And then I will ask the client to do a little bit of homework and send me a few inspiration images. And it could be things that you love and also things that you hate, because that's also really important for me to know. And it just sends me in the direction of where I'm even starting, really. And some of my clients I don't know at all and I don't have any connection to. And so I don't know them aesthetically. So I think the first few months are really important for concept design and concept phase of where are we going? What are we sourcing? What tones do you like? What materials are you allergic to? Different things that people wouldn't really think about. And then from there, I'll have a big concept presentation. And depending on the scope of the project, if it's like a full reno or if it's just FF&E, which is just like freestanding furniture, I will develop concept based on like the overall project or just room by room. I think for you, we did room by room.
Yeah, we did room
And then
by
we
room.
did a few concepts for the kitchen because we demoed part of that, and then the fireplace, which we love that tile.
Yes, love.
And then from there, once that is all set in stone, then I'll start sourcing furniture. And so I break down a presentation by room. And so I'll have anywhere from 3 to 4 options of one piece of furniture, because even if I love something, the client might not. So I always want to have options. And then I have the images, detail shots, the material, the price, dimensions, anything that's really important that the client might ask. And then with all of that, I have my preferred page of the whole collection of the space so the client can visualize what all the pieces together would look like. And sometimes a client will want to see different iterations of that. And so I'll take their preferred preferences and like plug them into the whole overall collection and go from there.
Which that hero slide was so helpful for me to see, because I can't visualize a space like unless I see everything together. Like I just don't have that. My brain doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So I feel like if someone listening is like, okay, I kind of want to like try to do this for myself, going on Canva or whatever and putting all the pieces together that you want, like on one slide, like the rug, the couch that she like, took out the backgrounds of every piece so you could see it like it was in a room.
Yes.
And like anyone could do that, like on Canva, you know?
And pretty much every firm I've worked for does present in a similar way because it's really hard for clients to visualize. And again, that's why they're hiring us. And I think for anything custom or renovation, like for your mantle, I elevated that elevation of that wall and I photoshopped the materials onto that elevation so you could understand what you were looking at, because that one Zalige sample, it's like, what is this?
Right,
and so
right.
to see it like full scale makes more sense, and it helps me sell that concept.
Yes. And it's way easier for us to be like, oh, like I actually don't like that blown up. Like I liked it on that little, 4-inch by 4-inch cube, but not when it was like the whole background or vice versa.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. And I think that's a good tip for just like anybody who's like trying to create a better space or trying to design their own space.
For sure.
On that note, what do you think are kind of some easy tips that you have, and you probably have endless tips, for someone to improve their space without using a designer?
Yeah. I mean, let's be real. Having a designer is a luxury.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't have them, which is totally fine. And I think especially today with social media, there's so many incredible designers that are sharing their day-to-day palettes and their overall projects. And it's so easy to be exposed to good design. And it's not just looking through magazines anymore. Like all over Instagram, there's such fabulous things that are even inspiring me every day. And so I think trying to emulate what you see and what you like. And sometimes you don't know what you like until you see it. And so I think that's really important, especially now. And I think for me, mixing textures and materials is really, really important. It just creates interest in a space. And so I don't love when things are super matchy. And I love different textures either through fabric or through woods or through mohairs or textured wallpapers or anything like that, just bringing different contrast within the items themselves.
When you're trying to mix a texture or mix two pieces, are you looking for a through line between those two pieces? Like they're the same, they have the same color within them, even though they're different textures, or do not, like, how do you do that? Because I feel like I would be afraid to do that on my own. I'd be like, this is going to clash too much. So What's like kind of, do you have any tips when it comes to matching textures?
I mean, yes and no. I think, again, it's very project specific and I think it's very room specific. But I love, like, even just looking at this, like, these are both cozy. You know, your vibe was you wanted spa.
Mm-hmm.
And so both of these are cozy spa. Like, when I am in my robe, that's what I wanted to feel here. And then with the limestone, whenever I go to a spa, which is the best place ever. But when I go to a spa, I see a lot of travertine. And so I wanted to bring that in through a surface, and like the smoothness of the honed travertine with the texture of this, like those worked together for me. And so kind of working that way. And a lot of this is very tonal. And then we brought in some of the orangey hues in the rug, but they're all kind of in the same tonal color family, but the textures are different.
Okay. So same tonal color family. And for someone who doesn't really know what that means, this is why it's good for me to interview you, because when I tell you you've taught me a lot, but I still I know nothing. So that tonal means what?
So tonal, like in terms of saturation of a color.
Okay.
So if you're looking on the color wheel and, you know, let's say there's like a blue and green and those are very different colors. But if they're both like desaturated and both muted, but they're different colors, they're kind of in the same tonal family.
Okay. That's a really helpful tip.
At least that's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you can match textures if they're similar tones. Okay. That's super helpful.
Great.
What about like trendy pieces versus timeless pieces? Because I think it's so easy to go into a Crate and Barrel and just be like, I want this, 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 and this, and this. But a lot of times those designers are probably pretty trend forward, I would guess.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So how do you mix something? And you did a really good job of like, you were always kind of wanting us to find some like vintage pieces and to make them more timeless. But then we also did get a lot of stuff from like Crate and Barrel and things like that. So
totally.
How do you mix, or what do you think is trendy right now? That's the first question.
Yes.
And then what do you think is like timeless?
Yes. So I don't want to be design canceled because one designer's fugly is another designer's beauty. So I am hesitant to say what's trendy because I could say a lot of bad things that could be very good for other designers. But I will say what I think is timeless is bringing in antiques from different eras and countries and mixing. So kind of in the same line of what I was saying about mixing textures, mixing new and old. And so new is new product from Crate and Barrel, for example, and old is your chairs we got from First Dibs or from the 70s from Italy that are amazing, that have those beautiful spindle backs and were recently restored. And so they look good with new product. But I think just mixing antiques are everything. They bring history and a story into a space. And I just love that they don't look new. And furniture isn't made today like they used to be. And so a lot of antique furniture are solid woods. And I feel like today I'm living in a world of veneer. And so they're just historical. And I feel like that's really important.
Yeah. And they do elevate like the space. Another example is our art by our fireplace. Like those pieces are from like Anthropologie, I think maybe.
Those are from Lulu.
Okay. Lulu in Georgia. And then the
mirrors from Amsterdam Modern, which is one of my favorite vendors in Los Angeles. And that mirror is also Italian from the 70s, leather wrapped, the original rope, really pretty. But like, again, that contrast of new and old. And it looks so good together. And then with the handmade Zalige tile on the mantle, like all of those work really well together, but they're all very neutral.
Yes. Yeah. Same tone.
Total. Yes.
Well, that's really helpful. And where do you find, you said First Dibs, where do you find your antiques?
Oh my gosh, everywhere. First Dibs, yes, is a great platform just because sourcing does take a lot of time. And so to have a lot of vendors on the same platform just helps a lot just with time management. And then Los Angeles, my favorite city ever, has such incredible vendors. And I think even just being in LA for 3 years has completely changed my perspective of design. And some of my favorite vendors that I've ever worked for are all East LA. And so even when I'm not working, I'm working. Like on the weekends, I'll just go thrifting and go to consignment stores or go to galleries. And I'm not necessarily shopping for a client, but I do always find something. And that's actually kind of how I found that perfect mirror.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, you're only as good as your vendors, really.
Totally. Because it can be very overwhelming, I think, to find those diamond in the roughs when
Mhm.
you're at a vintage shop. So do you have any tips for looking for a quality piece of vintage
Yeah.
furniture?
So for like the average consumer, I also think Etsy is an amazing resource because you don't have to be like to the trade. It's anyone can go on that platform. And a lot of the time, financially, it makes more sense to purchase through Etsy because there's no middleman or like no showroom. And so you don't have that additional markup. But you really have to dig through Etsy. But even for my place in Santa Monica, I found, I think, 3 different antiques that are fabulous and I love them, but they were maybe $300 and I had to clean them up a little bit myself, but not much. And I think it's just a really good option.
Yeah, totally. Or that's where we got this rug, right? Etsy.
Yeah.
It's not vintage, but
No,
it's
we custom.
yeah.
But yes, through Etsy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
through Etsy. And they have like affordable stuff. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't like an arm and a leg for the
Totally.
rug, but it's like beautiful and
We love it.
yeah. Speaking of that, of which, what pieces in a home do you think are worth the investment versus where can you go budget and still get high quality?
So I think on the same topic of antiques specifically, I think investing in antiques is really important also because they increase in value over time. I found a chair, I think from the Alameda Flea Market like 7 years ago, which is northern San Francisco. And I saw it on First Dibs and it's 3 times the cost of what I purchased it for.
Wow.
And so I think that's something that people don't realize either is like, yes, you're investing now, but it's like, it is a real investment. And so you can sell them later on and actually make a profit. And I think antiques only look better with age. So I think investing in antiques, specifically case pieces, because they have such a large presence in the room. And again, going back to like the solid wood concept of furniture making really isn't prevalent in today retail stores. And so case pieces I love. And
Case piece is like a case. Like what's a case piece?
thank you for that question. A case piece is like an armoire or a dresser or something that just has like, it takes up a lot of surface area and feels bulky in a room. And because to your eye, it is taking up a lot of space, I think investing in those pieces are really important.
Yeah.
And I think French or Italian pieces from the 60s and 70s is my favorite era.
Yeah.
And I think where you could save is the smaller pieces. So like little side chairs or sometimes accessories, we can also find great options on Etsy.
Yeah.
And I think it also depends on the client because it's always interesting to me to see what a client wants to invest in and what is important to them because I could say case piece and they're like, absolutely not. I'm only spending $200 on a case piece. And I'm like, okay, we'll make it work.
Right.
So it really just depends.
Right. That is one thing that I like. You gave us vintage options for so many different things. And I kind of regret not going with more of the vintage options because really when we were looking at the price, a lot of them were like the same.
They were the same.
Yeah, they were the same prices. And
yeah.
so now that we do have a few vintage pieces and I've like lived in them a little bit, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I guess I was just scared that like the quality wouldn't be as good or something. And that's
we
not
also
the
had that
case.
dining room chair situation and like 2 of them became the rope were.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I forgot about that.
I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, we got. That's why working with you was so nice because we had these. The listeners, we had these dining room chairs that were vintage. What era were those from?
Those were 70s.
70s. Yeah. And they were beautiful.
Stunning.
But they came like kind of damaged and stuff.
They were more damaged than what the listing said. And so I think 2 of the 6 were not in great condition. And I think Kenny immediately was like sat in them and they squeaked and they just weren't comfortable. And I was like, nope, they're out.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I had to work for 2 months to get that credit for you guys, but I will always make that happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the vendor returned them and then we found the really similar options from a vendor in California. Yeah. And they're super comfortable. I just sat on them.
Oh, they're great. We
Yeah.
we love
I
our
love
chairs
them.
now. Yeah.
Great.
They're not the they're not the vintage ones, but they're
But
still
they
beautiful.
look very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, totally. Totally. Anything else that comes to mind with like investment pieces, like anything with like art or because art was really tricky for us.
Yeah. And again, art is really personal and I never want to be really pushy towards a client because again, it's their money. They get to decide how to spend it. But I do think, especially at our age, now trying to invest in art because, again, it will also increase in value over time. And I think starting to build a collection over years and years is really important, and it can always move with you.
Mhm.
You can always replace it anywhere. And so I think even just starting with one piece that you and your partner really love and value together. And also there's just like, I love having pieces in a home that have a story behind it. And so you finding something together, it's growing with you in the home. I just think there's like a beautiful moment there.
Yeah, or finding like local artists, I think is really cool. Something that it takes more time though than just
Yes.
like finding something online.
Yeah. But then it's so fun. And then you have that experience of like going to East Austin and shopping in the galleries. We
Yeah.
found this together.
Right. It's like a date night.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Faux pas that you commonly see, and I know you don't want to like shame anybody, but are there some easy low-hanging fruit that somebody, if someone's to go design their own space, that maybe they should avoid, or something that you commonly see when you like walk into your friends' houses that you're like, oh, that's a really easy thing you could just like tweak and make better?
Yeah. I mean, I think scale is everything, and the sizing of things is really important. And I know for me as a designer, I have the tech programs to help me figure out what makes sense. So that's why we did furniture plans and elevations. And if for custom furniture, we do a whole shop drawing process. But I think for, again, the average consumer, like blue tape and a tape measure is everything. And when I walk into a space and something is off size-wise, like I'm turned off. You know what I mean? Like I immediately lose it and my eye just like goes there and it just throws off the whole space. And I think there's a very appropriate time and place for overscaled pieces. Like overscaled art, I think is really, really fun. But I think if there's a coffee table that's like 20 inches diameter and you have a 100-inch sofa, it's not functional. You know what I mean? So it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Are there hard and fast rules when it comes, and I'm sure there are with design, like how big a table should be under a chandelier and things like that. But is it more just like it should look right?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
I mean, yes and no. I guess a general rule that I typically do is for a coffee table, if you have, let's say again, like a 100-inch wide sofa, I usually go in at least 12 to 18 inches on either side. And then that's kind of the width of the table. I think just visually, I think that works.
Yeah.
And then again, depending on the size and shape of your room, if it's a rectangular or a round or this like curvy thing here, I think it just depends what the layout of the other seating is. But I loved having something curved and rounded because this also had that curved rounded profile.
Yeah. I like how you take elements of certain pieces and like draw them into other
I think
elements.
having all of them relate to one another and talk to one another is really important.
Yes. Any other just like tips that you have just for anybody to kind of be their own designer? Anything that you've picked up over the years that you feel like this is really easy and easy to implement, but no one's doing it?
I think layering is really important and really fun. There was some design firms I worked for that were very minimal and we didn't have a lot of accessories. And then others like Kinfolk and SF that everything was about layering and like building on top of one another. And so at the end phase of the design process, we can have a pillow package, which Kenny loved, or we can have an art package or accessory package. And clients want to work different ways. Like sometimes they'll just give me an accessory budget and I just go shopping. Others want to approve every single little piece of item that goes on a surface. And so it really just depends. But I think I'm kind of in my layering era. And so for my own home in Santa Monica, I've been adding and adding as I've been out and about at thrift stores and flea markets. And I just love like the story of everything working together. And they're like different moments of your life. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Or like different trips or places. And so I think just building on top of each other. And I think there's also a time for a clean, modern contemporary look, but I'm right now just loving bringing more into a home.
Yeah. And then like you said, like everything, when you look at something, you're like, oh, I remember like I got that on this trip or I got this at this like local place or whatever. One thing that I love about you, I was telling our friends this weekend, is that everything you own and even everything in our house has a story.
Yes.
And you're like, I got this here and it's really cool and I got this great deal or whatever, like, which I just think is so cool. It just shows your passion.
And I think that's the beauty of interiors is like you can walk through your own home and see something in a new way every day.
Yes.
And I think for me, that's so fun. And Mike is always like, well, where is that piece? Where is that piece? And I'm like, I'm moving everything every day. and so sometimes things kind of get lost for him. But for me, it's like a beautiful puzzle of changing and adapting.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Well, this was so fun. I hope that the listener feels inspired. I know they will. Every time we chat, I feel so inspired and just feel your passion. And I'm so proud of you. So how can listeners work with you, find your website, all of those things?
Yes. So my name is Coco Greenblum and my firm is called Studio Coco Greenblum. And I've always loved the word studio. A lot of firms are called design or interiors or something like that, but I've always loved the word studio. And I wanted that before my name because at some point, knock on wood, I will have a full team. And
soon, I have no doubt.
Yes, hopefully. And so for me, especially working at all these very high-end, large AD100 firms, it's never just one person. It is a team. And so I always want to credit my team and I will rely on them. And so I want to be very collaborative and a full firm. But so my website is studiococogreenblum.com. Very simple. And there's like a get in touch page. And that also my name on Instagram is just Coco Greenblum and contact me.
Tell us what kind of projects you accept. Like, do you mainly go for like a full home or can you go room by room or what's like the smallest and then the largest type of projects that you accept?
So really all over the board, it really just depends. I definitely prefer the larger full scale projects because it's more cohesive and I can really control the direction of the whole space. But I do have some projects where we're doing, just a primary suite and bathroom renovation and furniture. But my preference is definitely the full scope. Yeah. But right now I have a little bit of both.
Yeah. Well, like our case, for example, I know ours is probably different because we're friends and you are nice to us, but you did our house and then we were like, okay, we don't need you to do the gym or like we have like another bedroom upstairs. That we used to like work out in. And then once I found out I was pregnant, I was like, okay, that'll have to be the new nursery. Coco, can you help us?
Yes, another nursery.
Yeah, she's like loving the nurseries.
I've been doing so many nurseries right now. It's so fun because they're all so different.
I know.
And I feel like I can go a little bit crazier in nurseries. And I know I had mentioned earlier, like not preferring things to be matchy-matchy, but in a nursery, I feel like having the dresser changing table matching with the crib is like so fun, and that's the only place I would do that.
No, it's so fun. I wish I haven't told the audience the sex of the baby yet, but it's like we did this like cool like safari wallpaper, and it just like things like it. We had so much fun doing it.
It's so fun.
I cannot wait to see it done. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my God, this was so fun.
This is really fun. Did you say your Instagram and website? Yeah.
Coco Greenblum is my Insta, and then my website is just Studio Coco Greenblum.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yay. All right, listeners, we will see you all next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.